Hi, I'm Columbus City Attorney Zach Klein. Domestic violence is an issue we take very seriously here in the City Attorney's Office, as we have a dedicated domestic violence and stalking unit that provides services to victims of misdemeanor domestic violence and stalking crimes. We also led the way in passing tough new gun laws that prohibit domestic violence abusers from owning or possessing weapons, as well as expanded the definition of domestic violence to include intimate partners. That's important because 10 million people a year in the United States are physically abused by an intimate partner. And nationwide, 20,000 calls are placed every single day to domestic violence hotlines. Right here in Columbus, our office prosecutes close to 5,000 domestic violence cases a year and serves more than 5,500 victims annually. We work hard to try to hold abusers accountable and to help victims start healing. Our advocates, prosecutors, and investigators work closely with victims from the beginning to the end of the cases. They attempt to make contact with every victim before each court date to touch base and answer any questions. We escort them to every court hearing and offer assistance with obtaining criminal protection orders. Our team provides advocacy, safety planning, and referral information every step of the way. I'm here with Betty Montero, one of our victim advocates. Thank you for joining me, Betty. Can you talk a little bit about what resources are available? This is clearly a daunting process for a victim in this situation. We offer a lot of services in the City Attorney's Office. You're part of that team. What can she or he expect to come to our office and the support that he or she will receive?
Yeah, definitely. We provide safety planning, like you mentioned earlier, as well as referral to agencies that provide counseling service, legal services. We help with that referral to relocation assistance as well as with shelters. So we work with Choices as well. We have a Choices person in-house that helps with that process for us. We have a Safe at Home program for address confidentiality. We have a few advocates that are certified to do that. We also have help people through the victims of crime application. So anything that has to do with victims compensation can also be a part of the things that we do.
So this is a holistic approach.
Exactly. And then we also have a location in our office for victims that come. So while the hearing is happening, they can be there instead of being in the courtroom. Because the problem is that in the courtroom, victims are so close to their abusers that they could become uncomfortable. Sometimes we have victims that are children who don't want to be in a courtroom setting. It's not good for them. So we have a place for them to be as well.
So this is a troubling statistic, and I think it's eye-opening to folks who may not be as familiar with domestic violence in our country.
Yes.
1 in 3 women,
Yes.
1 in 4 men are victims of domestic violence of some sort, which is astonishing.
Yes.
What do you say to someone that is seeking help?
Get it. It's really hard because a lot of people, depending on what's going on within that relationship, there could be plenty of safety concerns and why they don't want to get help. But there are from anonymous hotlines that they can call, being able to reach out to people within their family, and even people like at the prosecutor's office or any type of resource within the community. There's a lot of, so Choices has a hotline that they're able to call in, and there's other agencies that would be able to help with those resources that they're going to need, because it's a whole process, and it's not just up and moving. It's not that simple. So being able to navigate those avenues is going to be necessary for them.
And it sounds like the system is set up, and the picture you're painting is so accurate that we're here to serve. It's the sole existence of why we're there.
Yes.
And that victims, when they feel like when that gut feeling is there, that they need to reach out to us at the City Attorney's Office, to you, to other members on your team, and know that we care. We're here to make a difference, and we have these wonderful people like yourself, Betty, and others whose job and mission is to walk them through the process, and they should not feel afraid to be part of the process. We're here to serve them. So
yeah, and that they shouldn't feel alone, because a lot of time people feel that they're alone in this process. So knowing that there are people there that are willing to help them in that walk.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So most DV charges in Columbus are filed by the police, but sometimes victims of crime come to the prosecutor's office on their own volition. And we have a whole intake unit, and Becca Alexander is another one of our advocates who works in the intake unit. So Becca, a lot of folks stereotypically think, you call 911 and the police show up and that starts this process. And I want to start by saying that if you are in an emergency situation, you call 911 and call the police. But some folks may be afraid to call the police. And we have a whole intake division, a whole intake department down at prosecution. Why don't you talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, Becca, of what that looks like? How does that work if someone out there is a victim of domestic violence and they want to maybe not have to deal with the police right away, but want to talk to someone within the law enforcement world like us as prosecutors to get the help that he or she desperately needs and deserves?
Sure. So what I'll say is that there are several reasons why someone might come through our intake process. They might not feel safe to call the police. They also may have called the police and the police may not have filed charges for various reasons. And so our unit offers an opportunity for folks to have their situation heard and evaluated for potential charges to be filed. So I will also mention that our unit can serve as a source of knowledge to empower folks to make their own decisions. So if someone is not comfortable going through the legal process, or at least going through the criminal side of the legal process, they can get more information about how to seek a protection order and just general understanding about what that process would entail should they decide to go through that. They could also come and just ask to speak with an advocate to get information so they can feel empowered to make the best decision for themselves. So if someone does choose to try to pursue criminal action, they can expect about an hour and a half to a 2-hour process in our physical office if they want to do it all at once. So that process would require them to fill out some paperwork, which generally takes about 10 to 20 minutes. If they don't have time to wait that whole amount of time that day, they can always leave and come back another time when our office is open. And we're open between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday through Friday to try to accommodate people's work schedules who may work earlier or later in the day. And then when they come back, they will go through the interview process. They'll go with an intake officer to explain their situation. They'll provide any evidence that they might have for the case. Our office will collect 911 calls, police reports, photos, gather witness statements, perhaps get medical records to determine if charges should be filed. And if our office then does evaluate the case and choose to pursue criminal charges, the person would then sign off on the complaint, and that would begin the process of the criminal complaint.
Could a victim expect to have that a decision from the office all done in one day?
It is possible that the charges could be filed within that period of time that they come down, within 2 to 3 hours of being there. It's also possible, though, that our office would need additional time to collect more information. So when they come, they'll be told that the prosecutor has evaluated the charges and either approves charges, denies charges, or pens it for additional information. Sometimes the intake process can last up to several weeks just to determine whether or not charges should be filed.
Okay. Well, thank you for all the work that you do in serving the city and helping all the folks who are victims of domestic violence.
Thank you. And I appreciate your purple tie for domestic violence awareness.
Yes, purple for domestic violence awareness. So I'm doing my part in addition to the interview here and to make sure that we spread the word that wear purple, especially during October, to spread the word and support those who are victims of domestic violence. So thanks for recognizing it.
Thank you.
Our domestic violence and stalking unit team also includes 5 specialized prosecutors who handle all of our domestic violence related cases. They're specially trained to deal with the most involved, high-risk cases that may include repeat offenders, weapons used or brandished, severe injuries, as well as children, elderly or pregnant victims. I'm joined by one of them, Allison Lippmann, who's one of our specialized domestic violence prosecutors. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
So Allison, obviously the most important objective in court is to hold the domestic violence abuser accountable for his or her actions. But it's not the only objective. Can you talk a little bit about what you're thinking about when you're prosecuting a DV case?
Yes. So holding a defendant accountable is very important, but really our main purpose in prosecuting these cases is to keep victims safe. Keeping victims safe is our main purpose. Every single domestic violence situation is unique, and every victim is different, and every situation needs different things. So we try to get as much information as we can from each victim, and we have a lot of tools available to try and keep victims safe. Jail is what people often think of, and jail is only one tool. There are lots of other ways to keep victims safe. We can do things such as use GPS monitoring, and sometimes, depending on the situation, just having the defendant wear an alcohol monitor can keep the victim safe. So our main purpose is to keep victims safe, and then after that, it's to try and prevent this from happening again.
Okay. What would you like victims to know if their abuser is being prosecuted by our office?
So when charges are filed, when a defendant is charged with domestic violence, the first step is an arraignment. So when the person is being arraigned, our office always calls the victim to give them the information about the arraignment. And for the arraignment, the victim has the choice about whether to come or not. We'll give them the location and the time, and they can choose to come or not. After that, the victim will get a subpoena for the pretrial. And getting a subpoena can make people very nervous, because a lot of times when people get a subpoena, they think they're going to have to just go into a courtroom and start talking to a judge and talking in front of a bunch of people. But that is really not what happens at a pretrial. The purpose of the pretrial is for the victim to come and talk to our advocates and to talk to the prosecutors so that we can get as much information about the case as possible. We will make sure that they have all the resources that are available to them through our advocates, and our advocates are amazing. And we will also get information from them so we can figure out what's the best way to prosecute this case. People think that with domestic violence, our goal is just to throw everybody in jail. But we know that that is not going to fix a lot of problems. Jail is one possible outcome in these cases, but there are a lot of other possible outcomes too. So at the pretrial, we will be talking to the victim and getting that information, and then we will be trying to resolve the case. A lot of times victims think that if they don't want the defendant to go to jail because they still care about them, the best thing they can do is not come to court, but that's really not the case. First of all, when someone receives a subpoena, they are required to come to court, and they can get in trouble. They can get in legal trouble if they don't come. But also, we're trying to keep them safe and do the best that we can with this case. So if we have to piece together the case without their input, then the only thing that we're going to be looking at are the police reports and the photos and the 911 calls, and we don't have input from the victim. That's not going to paint the defendant in a very good light. So we will do all of that at the pretrial. We will talk to the victim, we will try and resolve the case, but if it doesn't get resolved, then it'll get set for a jury trial, and the victim will get a subpoena for that as well. That's going to be the very same process. They will come to court, we will check in with them, we will make sure that there's not any more information that we need to know from them, and we will continue to try and resolve the case. It's really important to remember that we are able to get most of our cases, 99% of our cases, resolved through negotiation, through plea bargains. There's lots of different types of outcomes for these cases. Like I said, jail is one outcome, it's one possible outcome, but there are many other outcomes depending on the situation. Many of our cases resolve through plea bargains, many resolve through treatment and counseling, and there's a whole host of other ways we can resolve the cases.
So Allison, it seems like victim participation is critical, and that we're here to work with the victim. It's a team effort to ultimately make the situation safe.
Absolutely. And when victims come to court because they have a subpoena, they will not just have to go in front of the judge and start talking right away. Like I said, 99% of our cases get resolved through agreements with the defense attorney and the defendant. If it does not get resolved in that way and it does go to trial, we would never have a victim testify without having a lengthy conversation with her about what to expect during that process.
Mm-hmm. Well, you and the prosecutors down in DV do amazing work. You keep our community safe. You help victims who need it and deserve it. And I'm glad that you're part of my team and glad that you're doing this for the city of Columbus.
Happy to be here too.
Yeah, thank you so much. We know that victims of domestic violence need different kinds of help. Moving from victim to survivor is a journey. It's not an event. That's why we house representatives from local partners like LSS Choices, Franklin County Children's Services, Capital University Law School's Family Advocacy Clinic. While we hope you and your loved ones never need our services, We want you to know that if you do, we're here to help you.